Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this work session of the Washington County Board of Education. The board is meeting this afternoon in work session. This is a format that allows us to come together to receive information, to discuss, and to ask questions. There is no formal action to be taken this afternoon. We have 75 minutes set aside, and we have two topics. We will be spending time this afternoon learning about leadership development, and the second topic is enhancing literacy, strategies for supporting struggling readers. Before we begin, I'd like to turn things over to our superintendent, Dr. Savine. He has some things that he would like to address. Dr. Savine.
Thank you, President Williams, members of the board. We're currently in the midst of two recognitions, School Breakfast Week and Foreign Languages Week. I'd like to ask that Mr. Mike Embley, our Supervisor of School Nutrition Services, and Paula Moore, Supervisor of World Languages, to join us and share a few more remarks about the importance of these observances.
Good afternoon, President Williams, members of the board, Dr. Savine, student representative. School Breakfast Week, as we recognize, I'd like to highlight the importance of starting each day with a nutritious meal. Research shows that a healthy breakfast improves academic performance, attendance, behavior, focus, and much more. When families are in a rush to get out of the door in the morning, I encourage parents to remember that school breakfast is an option. Our selections tend to be more healthy than a quick bite at home or a fast food meal. Our Food Nutrition Services team is dedicated to providing delicious and nutritious breakfast options to fuel our students' learning and success. I'd like to thank our staff for their commitment to ensuring every student has the opportunity to start their day off on the right foot with breakfast.
Thank you, Mr. Embley. Mrs. Moore?
Good afternoon, President Williams, Vice President Stauffer, Dr. Sovine, and board members. Thank you for recognizing National Foreign Language Week and providing an opportunity to celebrate the diverse tapestry of languages that connects our global society. Being bilingual is a superpower. Language is more than words. It's a gateway to understanding, empathy, and cultural exchange. It is a bridge that unites cultures, broadens perspectives, and empowers our students to engage with the world in meaningful ways. I'd also like to recognize our world language teachers and our English learner teachers. These professionals are committed to cultivating language skills and promoting understanding and respect for diverse cultures. We appreciate their role in offering our students limitless possibilities for growth and connection through language learning.
Thank you, Ms. Moore. Thank you. Continuing on with our work session now, Washington County Public Schools is committed to growing our own team, from the educators in our classrooms to the administrators who lead our learning opportunities. This time, Dr. Webster, Dr. Palmer, and Dr. Wilcox have prepared a presentation about initiatives for inspiring and guiding our WCPS employees to grow their own careers and lead our students to success. Dr. Webster?
Thank you. Good afternoon, President Williams, members of the board, Dr. Savine. Dr. Wilcox, Dr. Palmer, and I are excited to share some of the work that we have done over the last year and a half to be very intentional about growing our current teachers and leaders into our future building and central office leaders. We have approached leadership development through two lenses: growth and support. We know that a highly skilled principal in every building is the key to inspiring our teachers to be leaders. We also know that we have amazing teachers and counselors in our schools who will be our future assistant principals and principals. We're going to share with you the different points along a teacher's trajectory to the principalship where we are targeting leadership development support. Before we break down each step along this pathway, we'd like to share, in the words of our staff who are currently in some facet of our leadership development program, the impact of the work, the impact that this work is having on their readiness to be leaders in our district.
Being a part of the Continuous Board has given me the opportunity to
to strengthen my leadership skills that I have as an assistant principal.
This program is an opportunity for the leaders, the future leaders in Washington County Public School to learn about how to lead as a building principal.
We had a series of sessions that we worked together with current administrators in the county, where we came together with other future administrators, had really great conversations, talked about scenarios, and really started to put faces to names and figure out how we can connect with different people in the county to best support us if we're interested in making that transition from our current role to an administrator.
We've had topics that include everything from reflecting on values, building relational trust, creating and learning from a vision, collaborating on case studies, and a deep dive into instructional leadership.
We worked on an entry-level plan so that when we do step into a school as a principal, we have that ability to look at our plan and really build strong foundation so the staff and students can be successful. And after going through all of that, I really think my leadership skills have really strengthened and feel more confident in being able to lead staff and students to success.
The Future Leaders Cohort has been an opportunity for me to look outside of the role that I have right now, which is as an assistant principal, and think about what it would be like to be a principal. Because I think in the day-to-day of what I'm doing right now, we don't have the luxury of thinking forward to what would we want to do, how would we do it, what are the structures that we need to have in place in order to actually make that a reality and a successful reality.
This has highlighted so many important topics, so many things to think about, so we're ahead and organized and already thinking about those important things so we can hit the ground running with the community and the stakeholders and the staff and students.
Having this opportunity to have a well-informed decision was really important to me. So I wanted to hear others' experiences. I wanted to hear the good, the bad, and the ugly, because I needed to know that it was right for me and my family to move into a position of leadership.
As a brand new AP, 2 months into the role now, this experience really did a great job getting me ready for this current role. We were able to talk about the scenarios, better prepare me for my interview, also allow me to have my materials ready. But also when I got into the role and started on day one, I had a better sense of where I needed to start, who I needed to go to, and know how to connect with the people around me so I'm successful in what I do.
I think for a lot of years there was just this idea that you went into administration and you knew everything and you had reached total enlightenment, and that's not the case. There's always growth that needs to happen. There's always development professionally that needs to take place, and if that's not happening, then we're not growing. So this opportunity really shows how important it is to Upward Leadership to continue growing our own, and without it, I'm not sure that we would be able to grow people into leadership roles.
The thing that we need to keep in mind ultimately is how can we best impact student learning, student needs, but also be there for the community as well. So going through this series really did a great job of connecting us with the different people in the district, different staff members who are in the current roles that we are, so we can all work together, because at the end of the day, we are here for kids.
Good afternoon. We began our leadership development work by targeting our current teacher leaders who are in our buildings and have their A-NEST certification. We wanted to recognize these teachers for the leadership they are currently showing in their schools and equip them with the information and skills they would need to apply, interview, and begin the role of assistant principal in our schools. To do this, we collaborated with current WCPS principals to create a learning progression for a 4-part Future Administrators Workshop. We would like to recognize Ms. Lindsay Avera, Ms. Amanda Milady, and Dr. April Bishop for helping us to develop and deliver the workshop content over the last 2 years. We felt it was very important that our current principals be leaders of this work, as they are the credible messengers on what they are looking for and need in our current assistant principals. You will see the topics covered during the workshop on the screen. We have run this workshop for 2 years and have seen a noticeable improvement in our candidate pool for assistant principal. We enjoy getting to know our candidates during the workshop series. Supporting our first-year assistant principals. We have also been intentional about planning our support to our new assistant principals and administrative interns. Last summer, we held a summer orientation meeting with our new elementary and secondary assistant principals and administrative interns, and we followed up with 4 half-day trainings during the year. These touch points provide us with the opportunity to share information across a variety of topics that you see on the screen and to be able to respond to the training needs the assistant principal and administrative interns ask for. Because our number of new secondary assistant principals has grown, we have also created a targeted professional development effort for this group. I am meeting with our new secondary assistant principals twice a year for check-in meetings to provide coaching and feedback, and I'm also conducting 4 check-in meetings this year with our 2 secondary administrative interns. All of our new first-year secondary APs and interns are going to have the opportunity to meet with Dr. Webster, their principal, and myself in the spring to share their work from the year, what they have learned, and what their goals are for year 2. This professional development opportunity aligns with the standards 1, 2, 4, and 10 of our school-based administrator evaluation tool. This is an important opportunity for us to get to know our leaders, celebrate their work, and be able to provide customized support to ensure their continued growth and success in the role. At the same time, we also know that we need to provide ongoing professional development and learning opportunities for our current assistant principals. We are conducting 3 professional learning opportunities for all of our current assistant principals throughout the year so that we can get relevant information directly to them and have time built into the calendar to provide targeted learning as needs arise. These meetings occur in the afternoons of the end of the marking period professional development days. In addition, I have conducted one-to-one meetings with all current secondary assistant principals to be able to provide customized professional development support for their current individual needs and their future career aspirations.
So this year, as you saw in the video, we selected 11 of our current exemplary elementary and secondary assistant principals that are demonstrating a strong potential and desire to become principals as our future leaders cohort. With the leadership training, we have been able to develop their knowledge and skills to equip them for a smooth transition to be the building leader. We are engaging the leaders in 6 days of training throughout the year, focused on first building community and camaraderie among themselves, and to be able to provide that support system as they enter the principalship. The additional topics are indicated on the screen. We are equipping these leaders to be grounded in their core values and to be able to articulate their beliefs to their staff. We are also assisting them with the knowledge to be able to build strong teams, find the strength in their staff, and be able to manage the competing demands of the job, to include being an instructional leader despite the daily challenges in the role of principal. We are thrilled with the level of thought and commitment among these leaders. This is important because we anticipate several elementary principal vacancies this year due to retirement, and we are excited to have these WCPS leaders ready to assume the principalship in the absence of our talented retiring leaders. In addition to the cohort, Dr. Webster, myself for elementary, and Dr. Webster and Dr. Wilcox for secondary have engaged with 6 of the cohort members in professional development team meetings at their school with their principal. We also engaged with several members of the Future Leader cohort last year in the same fashion. The professional development team meetings are an opportunity for the assistant principals to share their work with us, the impact of their work, and to discuss their daily challenges. We also customize these meetings to focus on growth the assistant principal needs and the assistant principal feels they need, along with the team, to help them to assume the role of principalship. Because we have seen many changes in the principalship at the elementary level, we also created a cohort for new elementary principals. Mr. Fowler and I are leading 10 meetings throughout the year to provide coaching, professional learning, and support. We're using the instructional change agent as an anchor text for our learning. We also find it's important to provide time for our new leaders to discuss and work together to solve current problems of practice. In addition, many of our central office leaders have been able to provide targeted information and guidance to our new principals. This has also allowed the cohort to build relationships with some of our key leaders and know where to go when questions arise.
And that hopefully gives you sort of an overview of our approach. I will speak on behalf of the team here. We enjoy this work tremendously. We have amazing staff in our buildings who it's fun to watch them pick up new things, grow, learn from each other, engage with them, problem solve with them as we talk with them about what's happening in their schools. And this is very, very rewarding, and also we know that this investment of time is important to grow our future leaders here in the district. And it's not going to happen by chance. It's something that we create time to do and intentionally spend time with our future leaders so that when we have vacancies, we know our leaders and we know we are prepared to fill those vacancies. So at this time, I would like to turn it over to the board for any questions.
Colleagues, questions?
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Peter.
Peter?
I think I'm on. Am I on? Yes. Is this a new approach? Like, I'm trying to get a picture of what we were doing before to grow our own, and what's been the biggest enhancements.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Beckford. The biggest enhancement is really being very targeted and intentional. So with the Future Administrators Workshop for the teachers who have their ANS certification, we pulled that list from HR. We went through that list of folks. We asked for principals. Who on this list are your leaders in your buildings? They're already your go-tos. We sent special invitations to those folks, although we've also advertised the availability as well so that anyone who might be interested, but we want to make sure that we're also helping our leaders to feel seen, and we see you, we value you, and we see you as a future leader in this district. And then the workshop series is new in terms of being able to take them through the series of what does it take to be an AP? How do you prepare your resume? What's the interview going to look like? To really make sure that those folks can see and imagine, and you heard their voices in the video, that those opportunities, and we're very heartened to hear that and thankful to our principals who led that series for us, that it did encourage and has encouraged our folks to apply for assistant principal. And I will say, and we'll hang on and hope we're okay. We've been able to fill our vacancies. So we're excited about that. And the other piece is intentionally coaching our future principals. When they're sitting assistant principals, that's a new piece as well, to spend time with them in their buildings, to do what we're calling the professional development team meetings with their principal, having them share with us the impact of their work, their current challenges. Where do they feel like they need to learn a little bit more before they assume the principalship? How can we connect them with a customized professional learning? A lot of times they want to spend time with our curriculum team. They feel like they need a little bit more time to make sure they understand some of the those expectations before they assume the principalship. And then the other enhancement, adding the cohort where we do have those assistant principals for 6 days throughout the year. We've done 5 of the 6 days so far to take them through really making sure when they enter their building next year or the following year that they have an entry plan, they know what their leadership is going to look like, they can imagine how they're going to approach their job. So I would say the biggest change is, and I'll because Dr. Palmer and Dr. Wilcox have spent time with leaders and invested in them, I would say the biggest change is just our organization and programmatic approach to it. But I don't know if you guys want to add anything.
I would agree. I think we're a lot more intentional with what we're doing. So it's not that we haven't done things in the past, but not to this level.
Also, just a couple other questions. When you mentioned you target assistant principals in the audience, your audience was assistant principals with ANS certifications. Is that pretty typical that an assistant principal has their ANS certification?
The teachers with ANS certification.
Okay,
I might have
got it.
misspoke.
Yeah.
So the
No,
teachers,
you probably didn't. I probably did.
the teachers with ANS certification. So those are our teachers who've gone through an administrative certificate program, and they're in buildings debating if they want to enter school-wide leadership. And so we want to try to make sure they understand the benefits of school-wide leadership.
Is that fair? Like, I mean, do you have any idea of how many teachers go after get their ANS?
We've seen the list many times. I'm blanking on how many it is.
I would guess 40 or 50.
Yeah.
Okay, 40 to 50 out of a year.
Yeah.
Got it. And then the only other thing is, when are you doing these trainings? Because I imagine one of the things you have to deal with is also not taking them away from their duties at school when they're needed. So when are you trying to fit those in?
Yeah, so we do the assistant principal, well, let me go backwards. The teachers who are in the future administrators workshop, we do those after school. So they come in for a couple of hours from like 4 to 6. We do the future principals cohort. We do pull those APs. Those are 6 full days they spend with us during the school day. And then we've done 6 Mondays through 6 months of Mondays, once a month. And then the current assistant principals, all of the other PD that we're doing with assistant principals, we do on those early release days in the afternoon after students have left. And the future principals, they meet bright and early at 7:30, or the current new principals, they meet bright and early at 7:30 in the morning. Try to squeeze that in before the day starts for most
Hopefully
schools.
there's breakfast. We can tie it back
Yes.
to our honoring. All right, thank you very much.
Yep.
I was just going to ask, I was looking at that one of those first slides there, and went from 35 teachers 2 years ago to 22 teachers this year, and I was wondering if the recruitment was part of that, if we had enough people move forward. You kind of just answered that, but I don't know, maybe you could kind of touch on, are we doing anything to encourage rock stars that we think might be great leaders to say, hey, maybe you should consider this. Do you want to check out the program before you go and look for that certification or anything? Is there anything you can elaborate on there?
Yeah. Do you guys want to take that one?
So I would say one of the reasons why we see the difference is that we haven't had a lot of additional teachers that have joined that pool of 40 to 50. So the first year we had a large number because we had, 50 people we were choosing from. The next year it's pretty much the same 50 unless they've, applied for a role, which some of actually we've hired 2 this year from this current year's group. So we definitely are seeing the benefits of it. And I feel like personalizing the invitation to the folks that have the A&S degree to say, why don't you come see what it's like? Come and just learn a little bit more and see if this is something that you would have an interest in, and developing some skills and just a better understanding of what that role is. Because it doesn't matter that you have an assistant principal in your building until you walk in those shoes. It's not, I don't think you can fully understand the role.
I'll just add that I think it helps too that we ask principals who are the leaders in your building, and we give them the list of A&S so that they can see, and then they provide us recommendations, and then we can go and say to the people we're inviting that you've been recommended for this, your principal thinks you're a good fit for a possible assistant principal position down the road. And so I think those invitations and those personal connections help to increase our pool and to increase the amount of people that potentially might be interested in an assistant principal position.
Thank you.
So, Dr. Wilcox, there is invitation. Is there also the opportunity for individuals to self-select,
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we have both. We do an invite for specific based off of principal recommendation, and then there is an open pool that people can apply to show interest in the cohort.
Okay. And I heard the word invested, that we are investing in these individuals. Is there any kind of commitment in particular from the assistant principals for future employment? We're investing in them, we're training them. Is there any ask of them in terms of, we hope you'll stick with us for a principalship or anything like that?
I think it's we're laughing because we do put a lot of time and effort into these individuals, and we hope that through that relationship and that connection that they will stay with WCPS. And because you're right, we do invest, we're putting a lot of time and thought and care into our future leaders, and we would love for them to stay here. As we know, there are competing interests out there and competing counties around us, so we're keeping most of them, but there's no official commitment that we can hold them to.
Right.
But we hope they stay.
Thank you.
In 2026, when the blueprint becomes a game changer and principals who will be required to have national board certification as well as spend time in the classroom. How will that impact what we're doing today?
So I think that the biggest impact on the leadership development piece would be making sure that it's going to still incentivize, because people don't want to take a risk and jump into a job that they don't understand or know what it's going to be like. So we'll be able to adapt the training to, here's what your day will look like when you're also responsible for instruction. So we can use this as an opportunity to demystify what that'll look like, I think, which will be helpful. I think it'll be a question for us as a district around the time commitment when we look at our current staffing, administrative staffing in schools. If the administrative team is spending more time directly instructing students or making sure we understand what the definition clearly means, we'll have to consider what that looks like for administrative support to schools, I think.
And I'll add that with, in secondary, we used our intern positions, our secondary administrative intern positions, to pilot what does 20% of the day look like in terms of that teaching aspect that Blueprint will eventually require. And we have a principal who's piloting for us what does a teaching 10% of the year, what does that look like in terms of that. So we have those two things going on in secondary to give us some further information to help us make decisions as we get closer to those benchmark dates.
Any other questions?
Is that something we could get a report out on? I'd be very curious to see what that principal's thoughts are on that.
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yep.
I just have one question. As a new teacher, how long does it take to them to get their certificate? And then what is the process from that time that they receive it, that they get that? Can they go immediately into that program? Or as a new teacher, they coming into our district, is there a time frame that you'd like to see them be in the classroom before they go into that program?
Take that one, Heath. You want me to do it? Okay. Well, basically, once a teacher has the administrative certification, so in theory, you could be a teacher who got your master's in administration before you even started teaching, and technically you could apply to be an administrator early. That's not typical. Usually our administrators have taught at least 3 or 4 years before they apply to assistant principal role. And a typical path is to go from teacher to lead teacher, or a different type of leadership role, department chair or team leader, some type of teacher leadership. Maybe not formal leadership, maybe it's informal leadership, but most have all have had some type of leadership before they apply. It's not typical. We typically see, I would say the typical number of years, at least 4 or 5 before.
I'd say 5 to 10 on average.
Any other questions?
I had one. If they're going for their ANS certification, it's paid for, right? Or we reimburse if they get a certain grade?
Yeah, we have tuition reimbursement that will reimburse 9 credits a year for teachers, and it can be 12 if there are remaining funds. So they can get a good portion of their certificate paid for through tuition reimbursement.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Webster, Dr. Wilcox, Dr. Palmer. Dr. Savine, would you like to introduce the next topic?
Yes, thank you,
Introduce the
President.
presenters?
Absolutely, President Williams. Next, we'll take a closer look at the many ways WCPS is supporting our struggling readers across our school system. Dr. Webster will now be joined by Dr. Willow, Dr. Brunson, our Director of Special Education, and Ms. Pumphrey, our Supervisor of English Language Arts and Social Studies, to give us the details of each of these achievements.
Good afternoon, President Williams, Vice President Stauffer, members of the board, and Dr. Savine. Today's presentation is really to give an overview on what we are doing as a school system to meet the needs of all of our students in terms of literacy instruction. So we're going to do an overview of literacy instruction for all students. We're going to get into what particular strategies or supports we have for students who need additional support in literacy. We're going to talk a little bit about professional learning that's available for our staff. And we're also going to talk about the team and the effort that it takes. Really, it's not one individual, but it's the full team when we're working with students who are struggling to develop those literacy skills that we need. Most of you, we've seen our literacy vision, not just in C&I, but in board presentations previously. What you may not know is that this is a newer vision that we created back in 2022-2023 school year. But the reality is, if we have to go back a little bit further in time, prior to 2020, we were a balanced literacy district, okay? And that's a little bit different than the science of reading. We made the shift in 2020 to a science of reading approach. And that's really where this vision comes from, where we're talking about teaching explicit foundational skills. Right around that time, 2019, this board made a commitment to universal pre-K. And they go hand in hand because these foundational literacy skills start really before pre-K, but it's essential that these skills are in place by kindergarten. You've seen the MSDE framework for continuous literacy improvement, the goal that all students are proficient in reading by the end of third grade. That is measured currently by our MCAP assessments. What you may not know is that every school in our district has a school improvement plan. And this is a goal that you will find in all of them, that all students will read at or above grade level by third grade and continue to read at or above grade level thereafter.
So we have a plan, we have a vision, and we need a plan to be able to reach that vision. So if we want all students to be successful and confident readers and writers, we have to work together with our school leaders, with our teachers, with our lead teachers, the various staff who work with students, and we have to provide the instruction necessary to help our students to succeed in literacy. So the three elements in our plan, we have a WCPS comprehensive literacy plan. I heard mention earlier of the blueprint. That is part of the blueprint expectation that we submit a literacy plan, but it's also just an essential part of what we do. So our plan is really in three different elements. It's what skills are necessary to reach that vision, what resources do we need to reach that vision, and the most important piece we'll get towards the end is the culture of continuous improvement. Because as Dr. Willow shared, we recognized with various data points that we needed a change. We needed to improve because our kids deserve it. And so we are always learning. We're always trying to find the most up-to-date research, the best resources to provide our students what they need. So we're going to go through these three areas with you this afternoon. The first one is on skills. So we're grounding our training in the science of reading. We, through your involvement with the MD Leads and our Science of Reading initiative from MD Leads, we purchased a course on the science of reading, and you see the numbers there. 76% of our teachers in kindergarten through third grade have completed that course. That is a 30-hour asynchronous course that also includes some synchronous time to make sense of what the training is. We've opened that course up to teachers beyond kindergarten through third grade. To be perfectly honest with you, as you can tell, it's a pretty popular course. We have over 700 staff who have completed that training because they're very interested in learning, to be honest. Back to what Gary shared earlier, most of the teachers in our schools, when we went through education, we were trained in balanced literacy. We were taught to use the balanced literacy approach. So teaching in this way is very new for many of our teachers. So this course is available for all of our teachers. We have a course right now taking place. We'll have one again in the summer and again in the fall. So what is the science of reading? I'm going to break down the next couple of slides in what is actually included. I'll give you the little Cliff Notes version of the course. So the science of reading, you've seen this before, the Scarborough's rope.
This is really a graphic to understand what it takes to become a skilled reader. You're going to notice the bottom portion of that rope is the word recognition piece, or the decoding, how you learn to read with sounds and letters. The top part of the rope is the language comprehension. So we're going to zoom in on word recognition. It's very complex. It sounds simple. It's letter sounds, but there is a clear progression of how a student has to hear and understand and manipulate sounds, then connect those sounds to the letters so that they can then spell. And then as they see the letters combined, they recognize words. And that process that our brain goes through is called orthographic mapping. And the more our brains orthographically map words, the more automatic we are in knowing those words. And now we can read with fluency and accuracy. So that's that progression of skills to learn word recognition. What does instruction look like to be able to achieve that? Again, it's a very complex process, and it's broken down into really 4 key areas. So instruction that is systematic, meaning that we have a sequence. We have a progression of skills that we know we have to learn in pre-K, kindergarten, all the way through. It's also explicit. By that we mean we say very explicitly, this sound B is spelled with a B. It's that clear. And then we get into the alternative spellings for the various spellings, for the various sounds. We also give our students time to practice. Time to practice those skills might be reading a decodable text. I've just taught you these skills. Now you're going to have a chance to read and use those skills in a book. It might be a worksheet. It might be a game. It's really just making sense of what we just learned and practicing that. It also includes writing, lots of encoding practice as well. And then assessment drives the instruction throughout. The teacher is regularly collecting evidence of understanding, knowing what the students are learning, and adjusting as they go. The top part of the rope is the language comprehension side, and that is really thinking about knowledge. What do our students know so that they can comprehend any text that they are reading? So what does it look like to have a knowledge-building classroom? That's when you have lots of vocabulary, have multiple texts on a given topic so that you can transfer those vocabulary words and understandings of that topic to various texts. And again, opportunities to showcase their learning and share what they have learned. So we just did a basic general description of the training that we provide all of our teachers and all of our schools through the course, but also through ongoing professional development at the school level. Now, in order to make those skills come to life, we need resources to support those. So we're going to jump to the resource portion of our plan. An interesting resource that you might not think of is an assessment. Part of helping students learn to read is screening whether they have a difficulty in reading. And we provide a universal screener to all of our students in kindergarten, first grade, and second grade. Maryland, over the last, since 2020, has required through the Ready to Read Act that all kindergarten students are screened. In Washington County, we understand how important this is to understand if students are at risk for a reading difficulty, and so we assess all students, kindergarten, first grade, second grade. We also assess any students who are showing any risk level in third grade. So you're going to see the key areas that are assessed. We use what is called the DIBELS assessment, which is a research-driven assessment, 20 years of research behind that assessment. It's called the Dynamic Indicators of Basic Literacy Skills, and we use the newest 8th edition. And I'll give you a minute to see the skills that are assessed in each grade level. Another resource we have is the instructional side of now we know what you might have areas of strength or areas of need. You're going to see on the left side, should look familiar from the slide before. That is how DIBELS assesses our students. Across the top, you see grade levels, and then the green bands are the units in our CKLA core resource that actually explicitly teaches those skills and assesses those skills. So we do have a very clear plan of how to make sure every student is exposed to these skills, explicitly taught these skills, and then given support to continuously learn them. That DIBELS assessment is communicated with our caregivers. We give the DIBELS assessment beginning of the year, middle of the year, and end of the year. And with each administration, we send home a letter to our parents to tell them what the score is on that DIBELS assessment. We also provide a link to this website that students can, or that parents can go to the website and learn activities that they can do with their student to help support them. In addition, we have a Ready to Read Act page on our WCPS website that provides even the early warning signs for dyslexia and some activities that you can do with your students. And if you're concerned, certainly reach out to the teacher and to the school. So another resource, and I was just in the school earlier today, and they were talking about, they actually stated, we know our students as individuals better this year than we ever have. And I said, can you tell me what led to that? And he named us several different things, but he said, we have data at our fingertips that we haven't had previous years. So one of the resources is what is called the early warning system. We've shared that tool with you before, and actually you helped purchase that addition to our Synergy tools that teachers have at their fingertips. And you see on the screen an example of the DIBELS 8, their previous year's DIBELS score. This particular student was well below. The end of the year, the expectation in kindergarten is a 420, so they were not meeting that expectation. Then given the DIBELS assessment in the fall of their first grade year, they had a 315. That yellow is a coding for just below. And then given again the assessment middle of the year, the student moved to a 395, and in first grade that is meeting the benchmark, which is why it's green. So the early warning system gives the data for these assessments across the administration and shows the progress that the student is making, or provides that warning that the student is at risk and needs additional support. When a student is below benchmark, we do recommend providing a multi-tiered system of support plan. And that's what you see the next picture there in the bottom right corner. That is a plan, again, embedded in our Synergy tool for our teachers and staff to use. So multi-tiered system of support is a tool within Synergy, but it's also a system. It's a process. It's how do we provide the levels of support to our students to help them learn to read. So Tier 1 is the first level that all students are provided. Tier 2 is that supplemental instruction provided for students who are not yet reaching Tier 1 expectations. And then Tier 3, Dr. Brunson will go into more detail in just a minute for those students who are struggling so much that need specialized instruction. So the multi-tier system of support is that number one, commitment to Tier 1 instruction. In Washington County, we ensure that every one of our students has time learning the grade level expectations in reading. We also then diagnose any learning gaps that a student might have. If they have a learning gap, we then create a plan. That's the MTSS plan, multi-tier system of support plan. And in that plan, we identify a very specific intervention that will support that student, and then we monitor their progress every 2 weeks. So in Washington County, thanks to you and your approval and support in the budget, we have Amplify CKLA as our Tier 1 high-quality instructional materials for elementary. And what you may not know or remember, CKLA has a specific portion, specific in kindergarten, first and second grade, called skills. That's the foundational reading skills instruction that was the bottom part of Scarborough's rope, where they have time built in 60 minutes a day for explicit instruction in phonics, decoding, encoding, and reading text that they have learned the skills. In middle school, for next year, we have Amplify ELA and McGraw-Hill Study Sync in high school, high-quality instructional materials to teach reading for our students in Tier 1. You've seen this graphic before. This is going to connect with what I just shared. We use the 4 A's process in both reading and math. That is simply that we assess. That's that screener piece, going back specific to literacy. That's DIBELS. We diagnose. That's various assessments to determine if where the gap is in reading. Then we make a plan and we monitor the progress. There's a lot of words on this slide, and I apologize in advance, but this is really to demonstrate that we do know, the research indicates that in reading, if you are struggling to read, you likely have a gap in one of these 5 areas. And so if we identify that gap, we can provide the very targeted and specific supports for that specific gap. And you will see intervention options for each one of those gaps. And as a team, we have used our research and the evidence-based interventions that we have available to guide schools in choosing the specific intervention for that gap. And then we also provide an example of a goal that could be used for that student, as well as a very specific monitoring tool to basically an assessment that you give every 2 weeks to determine if they're making progress towards that goal. And as you know, a system is only as good as the structure that allows for that system. So if we have this system of multi-tiered supports, we need a schedule that supports that. This is just a graphic that shows that we provide time in our schedule. All of our students, elementary, middle, and high school, have a designated block of time for that Tier 1 instruction and 30 minutes a day that they can be provided that small group targeted supplemental instruction, as well as the Tier 3 instruction as needed. As I stated earlier, I think one of the most important pieces of this plan is that we have in WCPS a culture for continuous improvement. So we have to continually learn and we have to continually improve for the students in front of us. And we will not be able to give all students the right to be successful and confident readers and writers if we aren't continuously improving. We do that through collaboration. Dr. Brunson and I spend a lot of time together, special ed and general ed, talking through what we're learning together. We read books together, we have conversations, we talk about goals, we talk about individual students. We do a lot of collaborating. Our teams, the special ed team, I have some wonderful team members behind me that collaborate with us regularly. We also collaborate with our EL departments. We collaborate with the general education teachers in the classrooms, the school leaders, so collaboration is key to continuous improvement. We also have coaching. Our lead teachers are very important in the school system. In the schools, they go into classrooms, they watch the teachers, and provide coaching support for how they can improve and better meet the needs of the students. That progress monitoring piece is embedded in MTSS. We have regular opportunities to assess our students. And again, at that school where I was visiting today, I was able to pull up the data for all of the students who have an MTSS plan and celebrate the students who are on track to meeting their goal. So we have a way to monitor whether we're making progress or not. And the overall goal is that we are closing achievement gaps for our students. So back to this visual. You've heard me talk about how important that Tier 1 instruction is, and when students are not able to access the grade level content or are struggling to learn to read, we provide that supplemental instruction in Tier 2. And then when students are still struggling and the data is indicating that they have more significant needs, we are able to provide that Tier 3 support. And Dr. Brunson is going to go into that in more detail.
Okay. Thank you for sharing. It's particularly about the collaboration that we have. We recognize that when we say all students, the only way we can do it is to work in collaboration with each other. And I do know that more specifically when schools, particularly at the elementary level with our early learners, there are data meetings that are happening, and we have curriculum folks as well as our special education folks at the table reviewing that data that is coming up through the MTSS plans and any other aspects of data to really drill down and really support our students. So the next slide gets into the topic around specific learning disabilities in reading, and that's actually a special education coding, specific learning disabilities, and this one is specific, this one is specific to reading. The areas of challenge that students may struggle with when it's related to reading are phonemic awareness, phonics, decoding, encoding, which is more like spelling, fluency, comprehension, and writing. And just point blank give you a definition of dyslexia, because that is a reading disability. According to the IDA, International Dyslexia Association, dyslexia is a specific learning disability that is neurobiological in origin and may include deficits in phonological awareness, which really sets the stage for decoding, blending, and word reading. Students with dyslexia primarily struggle with phonics fluency, encoding and decoding, which also affects down the road reading and written language. If you look at this slide, this is just a generic, but I like how it summarizes the early warning signs of reading that are associated with students with specific learning disabilities and dyslexia. And so if you look at that, just to point out a few, if we look at language, if students are demonstrating challenges with or difficulty with learning the alphabet, staying focused, learning to speak, or in reading, matching letter sounds, naming letters, or in writing, learning to write, copy at any age-appropriate level, spelling, or are expressing frustration, low self-confidence, or esteem, those are some of the early warning signs. And so one of the things that Carly mentioned was around that tier 1. We expect that all of our students, every last one of them, even those that have been identified with a specific learning disability through our process, are receiving that tier 1 instruction at all times. We realize that with that, coupled with an intervention, whether it's a tier 1, tier 2, or now I'm going to get into tier 3, that they need that to be sound-proof readers. Whenever we're detecting that a student is struggling, we start off with our collaborative processes. And the first step before we even step into the realm of special education is the utilization of our student support team. And as you can see in the slide, it lists the participants, but right there, bullet number 2, which is very important, is to ensure that our parents are involved. Our classroom teachers, we usually have a special education teacher present, even though we know not necessarily the student may not be identified as a student with a disability, but we certainly want them present. We have our investments by our school administrator, counselor, and any other valuable members that can be invited to the team. During that meeting, we discuss data. So we take the data, whether it's achievement data, behavior data, whatever it is. We look at the screening, diagnostic, formative. Actually, we would take an MCTSS plan, look at that data as well. We discuss additional factors like attendance, any interfering behaviors. We look at the educational history of the student. And then we look back, and that graphic with the tiered interventions, we'll discuss, what best practices we need to utilize for tier 1 and 2 instruction. And if the student had been receiving it, we would certainly want to see what progress has been monitored to see if the students are making progress on either one of those interventions. And if needed, they may need a tier 3. And if they do need a tier 3, that's like another warning sign to us that the student may be suspected of having a disability. So this is when we step into the special education process, what we call Child Find screening. Child Find is a mandate under the Individuals with Disabilities Act that requires school districts to identify and evaluate children who may need special education and related services. If there is a suspected disability, the school would hold an IEP team Child Find screening meeting. And again, our common participants to this meeting would be the classroom teachers, the parent, special education teacher, our administrator, counselor, behavior support, our school psychologist. And if we are considering whether or not the student has other challenges in writing, we might invite or fine motor, occupational therapists, speech and language pathologists, or other valuable members that should be invited to the team. During that meeting, we reviewed the current assessment data, again, achievement data, emotional, behavioral data, whatever is brought to the table. We look at educational history. We listen and we hear from our parents. We want to certainly hear their input. We also conduct informal classroom observations, so we look at that information. We review additional factors like attendance. And if there is a suspected disability, we determine which formal assessments are needed. And then following that meeting, we would have and schedule an evaluation meeting. And at that meeting, if the student is found to be eligible for a specific learning disability in reading or dyslexia specifically, then a meeting is held to develop the IEP. Following that, special education specialists will collaborate with the content specialists. Again, that collaboration exists even at that level to obtain input on the IEP, the individualized educational program, goals, objectives, interventions, and services. Okay. So when we are collaborating and we're trying to figure out what would be the best tool to use to support our students with specific learning disabilities, particularly in the areas where they struggle in decoding, encoding, phonics, fluency, we are now looking more for these more intensive types of interventions. I want to start off with our first one, which is the Benchmark Phonics Intervention for Reading. And again, it's great that Washington County Public Schools have 3 options that we can choose from. And again, we collaborate with our curriculum folks to determine, based on the needs of the student, which one would basically, essentially, that we should use with the student and will give us basically the biggest bang for our buck to support reading for our students. So if you look at the Benchmark Phonics Intervention for Reading, it is based on the science of reading, and it provides explicit instruction for decoding, including phonemic awareness, phonics, and word recognition. It has high-frequency words and encoding, which is like spelling. Support meaning making, including vocabulary and comprehension. Practice for fluency, including accuracy, rate, and expression. So that's one. The other 2 that, and I will say this, the Wilson Reading System has been around for about 30 years, and there are many versions of this. And I know that within this system, prior to me coming, many have been trained on previous editions, but I wanted to talk about specifically the Wilson Reading System 4th edition, which is what our teachers are being trained on this year and moving forward. And this one is a structured literacy program, and it's based on phonological coding research and Orton-Gillingham practices. It provides explicit, direct, structured, multisensory, sequential, and diagnostic instruction on phoneme segmentation, sight word knowledge, fluency, vocabulary, oral expressive language development, and reading comprehension. In addition, this year, we've added on another one, which is Bowman's Orton-Gillingham Plus. It is also a structured literacy program that combines the essentials of Orton-Gillingham with phonological awareness and reading fluency exercises based on research. We call it OG Plus, or Bowman's OG Plus. It is a highly systematic, multisensory, synthetic, phonetic approach which simultaneously builds reading, writing, and spelling skills. So again, Washington County Public Schools are very proud that we have 3 options that we can choose from to address students with specific learning disabilities, and more specifically, dyslexia. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Webster.
All right, and so we also wanted to share with you all the current status of our staff training around these Tier 3 interventions. If we take a look here, by the end of this year, we will have 27 staff who have completed 16 and a half hours of the Wilson Reading System 4th edition training. And we will also have a total of 3 staff who've completed the year-long Level 1 or Level 2 certification. Additionally, by the end of this year, we will have 9 staff who've completed Bowman's OG Plus training. Looking forward to next year and our training plan, our goal is, at a minimum, we aim to have at least 1 certified teacher in every WCPS school receive one of these trainings by fall of 2025, and we will kick off those trainings this summer. We are adding administrators, lead teachers, reading tutors, and paraprofessionals to our list of staff receiving that 16 and a half hours of the Wilson Reading System 4th edition training. And furthermore, we're planning to have 10 teachers who have already received this 16 and a half hours of training go through the year-long practicum to be level 1 certified. With regards to Bowman's OG Plus training, we plan to have 20 more teachers receive 60 hours of training and ongoing consultation provided by Bowman's OG Plus trainers. We are committed to ensuring that when students are identified as needing one of these Tier 3 reading interventions, that we have staff available to be able to support that implementation of the intervention. Dr. Willow?
I think at this point, we're open for any questions board members may have.
Colleagues, questions?
I have one.
Okay. Go ahead,
Um,
Dr. Seidman.
As you know, during public comment, we've had a lot of parents come in the last few times to talk about the challenges of dyslexia. Is this enough?
I think what you see here is a good start. This isn't a one-year fix. You know, when we talk about the resources and the supports, do we have the resources? Yes. Do we have a plan to train more staff? Yes. Do you take, if it was as simple as taking every reader that's struggling and being able to get them to the desired results in 1 year, that would be marvelous. It would be wonderful. That is our goal. But reality is that it takes multiple years of sustained Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 supports to truly close a gap. It doesn't mean we won't see growth. It just means to sit here and say that we're going to do that all in a year is probably, it's a good goal, but it's not always realistic. I think the key is to what you've heard in this presentation, that the plan is very individualized for the needs of the student. Reading is one of those where we all in this room could have a reading difficulty, but the reasons that our reading difficulty, our underlying skills may be different, from decoding to comprehension to vocabulary. It's not a one-size-fits-all. And so hopefully what you saw today, strong Tier 1, multiple Tier 2 supports, and Tier 3 supports for those students that need something more to close that gap.
And an overwhelming commitment to make it happen. Thank you.
Mr. Snyder?
So I'm sure that it's probably too early to tell since we've just recently transitioned into the science of reading approach, but do we know how significant the 30-hour science of reading course has been in terms of actual statistics or anything like that?
Well, I can share that we are regularly, across the administration of Dibbles, we are drastically decreasing the students who are in the well below, which is the high risk. Recently, this middle of the year assessment for kindergarten, we drastically decreased that. I think that it goes hand in hand. It's the training of the science of reading, but it's also the resource that that they can use to put that training into action. So the CKLA skills gives them the resource, and we have multiple follow-up professional development and coaching around the connections between what they learned in the course and what the resource is asking them to do.
Okay. And follow-up, would it be feasible to, would it be feasible to require this training course for K through 3 teachers as we move into this very reading-focused future?
Just repeat your question.
Would it be feasible to require this course of K through 3 teachers?
To be honest, yes. We highly encourage every teacher to participate. We share with principals the teachers who are not yet trained. We encourage them. We like to use the "you get to participate in this course," and we'll help you take that course. And we try to do it in a way that meets their schedule and their expectations. But yes, our goal is that 100% of our K through 3 teachers will be trained in the science of reading.
Thank you.
Mr. Stout?
Dr. Sitmeyer already asked my main question, but I'll play off that. At that business meeting, we heard from several strong advocates who reiterated time and time again that the Wilson reading system was just not as good as the Bowman, Orton, Gillingham Plus. So I guess my question is, why don't we just ditch Wilson and do everything with Bowman? Money's probably a factor, I'm sure. No? Okay.
Well, they are very, can you all hear me? They are very, even though they both follow the structured literacy approaches, and they both utilize Orton Gillingham principles, and they are multisensory, there is differences between the two, actually. And just to point out one significant difference is that the Wilson reading system actually gets into comprehension and writing, whereas OGE Plus does not. It's very specific to phonics decoding and fluency and encoding. So that's a huge difference. And again, based on the needs of the students, some of our students require, and it really does depend on the testing data that's presented through their psychological and their various tests that we provide them, educational assessments, and the data that we are reviewing. We have to decide which one is going to be the best fit for them that's going to address all of their individualized needs. Some students actually need just the decoding, encoding phonics, and they're significant. And then some need a blend of all of them. It really just does depend. And so we just like the fact that we have these three options, or mainly two.
And to going back to Mr. Snyder's question, we have a lot of data actually that Wilson is very impactful and shows a lot of growth for many of our students. And we would not continue using a resource that didn't have data to show that it works. So we can bring up many students that Wilson is very successful for, and we want to continue to use it with many of our students. We just need an alternative for some students who need something different.
And just to, sorry, we're going back and forth because we've been engrossed in this for a while. But you know, I do want to say that once you have those stronger foundations in phonics, phonemic awareness, and encoding, it is expected that fluency will improve and comprehension and writing will improve as well. So I do want to just kind of acknowledge that that is what the OG Plus, Bowman's OG Plus would offer. But again, it really does depend on the needs of the student. And I do want to also acknowledge that that Wilson reading system, they've been around for about 30 years and they have proven success. And they do provide that explicit guidance and instruction and resources around word structure, vocabulary, and fluency. And I just, you know, we're very proud to be able to have that as an additional resource for our Tier 3.
Mrs. Murray?
Dr. Brunson, does the Wilson program help students with dyslexia?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Evans?
Yeah, so I have a couple questions since that is typically the topic, I guess, of everyone's question, the dyslexia. Since we're doing all universal DIBELS assessments, are we seeing an uptick in the number of students with, I would say, suspected dyslexia? Because my limited understanding of dyslexia is that it's very difficult to accurately diagnose. So a lot of kids do go left undiagnosed. So all we can do is kind of look for the signs. Is that accurate? And are we seeing an uptick in those students?
So yes, the DIBELS assessment is a really important part in us being able to identify early if they have some reading difficulties, and then allows us to intervene early. So dyslexia, similar to various other disabilities, it's on a continuum. There's the very, very extreme, and then there's the not as extreme, and there's not necessarily just a line of where that, you know, where you cross over. So by giving the DIBELS assessment right in the beginning of kindergarten and throughout all the way through third grade, we are able to identify any student with difficulty, but then to pair that with, because they are showing that they're well below on the DIBELS assessment, that's a red flag warning, we can provide the explicit instruction that students with any disability need, and when we provide that instruction, they can show the growth and show the improvement, and so we're intervening early.
And so that kind of takes me right to my second question. So good job. With the universal DIBELS testing, you know, I would imagine we're needing to provide a lot of individualized support, like you said. I would imagine that's a very heavy burden on, especially our elementary teachers who already have a difficulty finding time to do all their stuff. What kind of supports are we providing, and where are we falling short that we as a board should be considering?
So we have the human resources of, we have reading tutors in our buildings, our reading tutor apprentices that we speak highly of and thank you for regularly. They provide, like one of the interventions was Sound Partners on the list of recommended interventions. That's one of the interventions our apprentices provide. Our reading tutors provide a lot of those interventions. And we have intervention teachers in buildings, and our classroom teachers also, to your point, provide that supplemental instruction. So during their reading instruction, they provide the tier 1, and then students typically do a variety of student-led practice while they pull a group of 3 students, and they provide a very targeted lesson for those 3 to 4 students based on their needs. And in most days, that involves a whole group instruction with all the students, and then 2 groups of 3 to 4. Also in our kindergarten classrooms where we have a full-time paraprofessional, that paraprofessional provides 2 additional small groups of instruction, which I think also has impacted that kindergarten data in DIBELS for the middle of the year. They're having a huge impact on our youngest learners.
Thank you.
I have a question or 2. The goal, a minimum of 1 certified teacher in every school will be trained in the Wilson Reading System 4th edition and or Bowman OG Plus by the fall of 2025. That 1 teacher, will that be an intervention teacher, a special ed teacher, a classroom teacher, a combination? What is the plan?
It would be a combination.
Okay, and how can we be assured that that trained teacher is available to work with the students who need that individual's services? How will that scheduling and planning happen?
So you're speaking to someone who used to be a principal. And so what happens is you're going to select someone within your building where it sort of fits best. So for example, we have in certain schools where case managers are serving in that role, providing the intervention. We have intervention teachers who are serving in that role, providing the intervention. And I do want to stress that we're saying a minimum. So we're not saying, we would love to have more than 1 in every school, but we want to make sure at minimum we have at least 1. And we stretch the timeline out because, again, this is not necessarily a mandated training, but we are requiring at least 1 per school. So we, when we're offering it over the summer, we certainly want teachers to volunteer to actually take the training, but we are looking very intentionally at every school, seeing who's been trained at the school, and if we have someone there who can provide that particular intervention. Because as we're making decisions, we want to make sure we have that resource right in the building that can provide it, because it does require daily practice.
So how can we assure that we have the number of teachers available? I would imagine that there would be a difference in the number of students from school to school who would be identified. How do we know that we have the manpower to address the need?
And so, again, it really just does depend because, again, students are being identified And then we have students who move into our district that are coming in needing an intervention. And so our goal is, we cast a wide net and we try to get as many people trained as possible. And so that's why we say a minimum. We certainly would like to have more so that we are ensuring that we're covering every student. But anytime that we come across a scenario where, let's say the student requires this Tier 3 intervention and we have a bit of a challenge with having that resource, then we work through that. And we actually have an example of a scenario now where we actually pulled someone from central office who's serving in a itinerant case management position role who's providing that intervention. So there are ways in which we can make sure that that student is receiving it if it's more than one or they need maybe one or the other. And, we have to make sure that the person providing the training has been trained and can provide the actual instruction. Hopefully that answered your question.
Thank you.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you. And I have another question. As many of you know, reading was my jam for 35 years, okay? And in Washington County, I have seen research-based basal programs, I have seen whole language, I have seen balanced literacy, and now we're at science of reading. So given what Dr. Willow said with regard to being all about the science of reading since 2020, correct? That's 4 years, K1, 2, 3 students who have been taught with the science of reading method. That leaves 4 through 12 kids who have been students of balanced literacy. Mrs. Pumphrey, are you seeing a difference? Are you seeing
Yes.
improvement that is measurable or?
Yes, and you can see that through our DIBELS data. We anticipate we're going to see it in our MCAP data. And to your point, I thought you were going, and if it's okay, I'll go this route. We do have assessments then for our 4th through 12th graders to diagnose if it is a decoding issue, and we have supports in place for supplemental instruction. So the structure in place for the 60-minute and the 30-minute supplemental instruction is also in our middle schools. And we have a member on our team, the Literacy Achievement Coordinator, who supports our middle school and high school in supplemental instruction for all of the middle school students who are struggling. But to answer your question, our DIBELS data, and that is something, I don't have the numbers in front of me right now, but I can certainly share that data with you. And we have had steady improvement since 2019 in terms of identifying students who are meeting the benchmark and able to read at grade level.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, no questions? Dr. Savine, is there anything that you have for us before we bring this to an end?
I just want to express my appreciation to our curriculum instruction leadership team, full special ed team. You can see it's a collaborative approach, very intentional, and we wanted to, in a timely manner, inform the board of our plan that's in place this year, expanding into next year. So thank you.
Yes, thank you. Dr. Willow, Mrs. Pumphrey, Dr. Brunson, Dr. Webster, thank you so much for the presentation. Colleagues, we will be in the conference room shortly. Time for a comfort break.